Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, how are my snipers doing today? I hope you guys are doing fantastic. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, today we're talking about the one and only Zebec coin. Listen, this thing, like we were saying, had to make a choice, okay? It had to make a choice, and we can see it has decided, right? The reason why I said it had to make a choice, ladies and gentlemen, is because we were getting squished from both sides. Now, you might be confused saying, oh, squished? What are you on about? Look, right, I'm going to take away these wicks. I'm going to make this super, super simple for everyone. All right, we can see that even just from the eye test, right, we have been consistently making lower highs. Now, if you know anything about these markets, you know when lower highs are formed that it is trending downwards. However, there's also something very, very interesting. We were also creating higher lows. And you can see what happens when you create higher lows and lower highs. You kind of come at a stalemate, right? Because here's the thing. Something consistently goes lower and lower, while something consistently goes higher and higher. And then eventually kind of just have a middle point where it's like, oh, well, we have to make a choice. Are we going to burst to the upside? Or are we going to burst to the downside? And we can see, right? We can see clear as day that we have decided to go up, right? So this is the last high low, and then we have bursted out, meaning we broke structure to the upside. So we made our choice to go to the upside. We broke structure to go to the upside. And now, of course, there is some type of retracement, which is expected, but overall, I expect this coin to hold its own. I expect this coin, probably come down a little bit more, roughly to the 0.0042 area. And the reason why I say this, ladies and gentlemen, is because there's actually a very, very nice key support right over here. Okay, so for the most fundamental thing, I would like to see a bounce off this zone, right? If things go well and according to plan, then we should bounce off of here and we should continue to go to the upside, right? And if we close higher than this point of here, 0.005, then, ladies and gentlemen, we are creating a higher high at that point, right? Because we have this high over here, we would create another higher high, right? We would have a higher low because we would close here, and the last relevant low is down here. So structure would look great. Something that has definitely helped this coin jump up a good amount is Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin at one point hit $109,000. We can see though, Bitcoin in the last 2 hours has seen a massive, massive sell-off. So here's the deal, right? Here's the deal. Because if Bitcoin fails ultimately to start creating higher highs and fails to go above this zone over here, right? Very, very key important zone. And eventually creates a lower zone. And eventually, let's say, creates a lower zone, right? It would consistently create lower and lower and lower highs, right? So what we want to see from Bitcoin is actually, some type of bounce back, okay? Some type of bounce back. Just off the top of my head, we could see a bounce back somewhere, if we go to the 4-hour chart, somewhere in this zone all the way down here, around $105,400 to $500. Now, I will say this is a very, very aggressive sell-off, okay? This is very aggressive. I don't like the way this looks at all, okay? Especially if it continues going down this way. All right, extremely, extremely aggressive. Usually when we do get aggressive sell-offs, there's only a little bit of a pullback, but then it just keeps kind of going further and further lower. So we don't want to see that. If that's going to happen with Bitcoin, then whatever's going to happen with Zebec, these gains will get demolished and we will go below the zone. Okay, right? If we go to something like the daily, we can see we don't want this to go too low. The reason why I say this is because we don't want this daily candle to reject so much. We already see half the candle got eaten up. So half the work for today already got eaten up, which is not the most ideal. Because usually when you see some type of big rejection, right, like let's say over here, right, obviously the context is probably a little bit different, But this candle over here at one point was actually bullish, because we can see we started over here, we pumped all the way up until this point, but then we actually closed lower than where we started. So you don't really want to see those types of candles. Okay, generally speaking, not the most ideal, but we'd still have a few hours left. And of course, if you want the most up-to-date information on Zebec and other altcoins, then highly recommend joining the Discord community. Okay. In the event where we do kind of just fail, right? This would ultimately mean Bitcoin would be looking to go back to lower to 100K, 92K. Then obviously this coin itself is going to go to lower levels, right? In the events where things do fail by the time this video comes out, then we would be looking at the 0.0033 zone, and then we would be looking all the way down here. Now, hopefully, based off the way the candles close for the daily and for the hourly hopefully things look good. If we use another indicator, right? You know me, I'm not the most high on indicators, but I still think they're solid and they're good enough to use, to show people, right? We can see that the orange is above the green. When the orange is above the green, that means we are bullish. When the orange is below the green, that means we are bearish. And we can see, right, this was the first time we broke out. And even though we're having an aggressive sell-off, technically the orange line is still above the green, so we are kind of chilling. When we go and look at the daily, we can see, right, we are still bullish on the daily. Just because there's pullbacks doesn't mean the overall sentiment is bearish, okay? Now, obviously, on the weekly, it's you can't really use it. It's not that fair because we did have very unique structure of it going sideways for months before it exploded. So it's not really that valid, right? Only the 4-hour is valid for this. We can see is very nice. The moment it broke off this zone over here, right? This zone over here, we could just see we sold off, never recovered. And the moment we, actually had some type of bullish confirmation break of structure is when the orange line finally went above the green line. So the 4 hours valid and the daily is valid so far. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, only time will tell because this is a very important pullback. But like I said, since Bitcoin is selling off very aggressively, hopefully, it does start to slow down and starts to reverse either around this zone of $106,000, 270, or potentially a little bit lower at the $105,500. Now, one final thing I am looking to cover, all right, we can see something like Bitcoin dominance continues to go up, very slowly, but it still continues to go up, which means altcoin season is not going to happen yet, which means something like Zebec is not going to see the most insane multipliers until Bitcoin dominance breaks. But that is for another video. That is it, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you guys did enjoy, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Goodbye.